this video I'm going to be talking about a very important type of game, especially when we're teaching phonics in the early stages, and that is matching games. What do I mean by matching games? Well, matching games are any games that we do that's the primary focus is on linking together two concepts and building links. So obviously when we're teaching phonics, what we're trying to do is build links between letters and sounds in the early stages at least. And then beyond that, we're trying to build links between letters and sounds on one hand, and then things in the real world on the other. So we may want to do a task which is going to associate letter A with A. Alternatively, maybe to associate A and A with apple or ant, something like this. So obviously we've got to do a lot of this when we are teaching phonics. And we could do it on paper. You can see here I've got some faces representing sounds and some letters. I'm just going to use these for the whole of this video, but of course bear in mind that it's not just about matching together sounds and letters, it's also matching any kind of pairs of concepts which need to be linked together. So yeah, we could do a matching activity on paper in a really simple way. We could do it simply by drawing lines. And if we were doing this on paper, we'd probably want to make it a little bit more complicated and make it so they have to draw lines like this. Well, all we're doing when we play games which have a matching goal is we're trying to make the students do this kind of action, but instead of it being down on paper with a pencil, we're doing it physically with our bodies by moving around and interacting with the teacher, with the board, with the other students in some way. So that's basically all we're doing. So all of the activities we're going to talk about today, and any activities I don't talk about that could conceivably be done, they all serve this purpose. All we're trying to do is to reinforce links between things. So let's look at a few examples. Now, a lot of the games I'm going to do today will involve the flashcards, this pretty small sample set. But it doesn't just have to be flashcards. So I will use flashcards just to illustrate the examples. But please bear in mind it doesn't have to be flashcards. You can do it with other things as well, just as easily. So let's take off these letter cards and we'll get to some sample games. If I can get the cards off the board, that is. No, doesn't want to come. Okay, so let's say I am trying to teach the associations between these letters, these sounds and their associated letters. In my up activity, I could, with everybody around, review what these sounds are, make sure all of the students in the class are okay. We've got b, s, p, t. Once we're all okay on these concepts, then I'll get everybody to stand up. So it's very good to make sure you do a physical gesture. So my one is just like this, but it doesn't really matter how you do it, but some kind of physical gesture that all of the students learn means now it's time to stand up. So we get all the students to stand up, and then we want to get them all lined up in one place. Now, of course, a lot of classrooms are very small. There isn't a huge amount of room to run around in, but it doesn't mean that we can't have any movement at all. So even if you've got even a very narrow space, if you get all the students to stand up and then line up maybe with their backs to a wall. As I say, even in a busy classroom where there isn't much space, if everybody stands up, puts their chairs in, you at least have the space behind the table where the chairs used to be, and that's usually enough for this kind of thing. Again, we call it a game, but it's not a game in the sense that they are primarily doing it for fun. It feels fun to them because it's a physical interaction, but actually it's just walking a very short distance from one spot to another. So even if we haven't got much space, that's still a workable option. So as I say, we get the students to line up, and then, well, there are variations to this. You could let a student pick a card, or I often prefer to have the cards down like this, and then have a student pick a card. So they pick this one, which is letter T. We then give the student the card and a magnet, and the student then needs to come over and decide where it goes. And hopefully our student is pretty sharp, and so they put it on here. We all congratulate them. Then that student moves to the back of the line, or they move to sit down in the table, or they move to the other side of the room. All of these things are going to depend on the physical space that you're working in. But then we will continue and move on. Next student will come up and put their cards up on the board, and so on and so on. And there are variations you can do on this basic matching activity. You can try and do it very quickly. You can, I often like to leave up the completed ones. So if one kid has done that, let's say, and one kid has done that, I would lead them on. But especially later on when they're much stronger in their associations, you can, once it's done, you can take them off and reset, or you can shuffle them around, and so on and so on. There's lots of different variations you can do to make it match with your students and your environment. So that's it, a very, very basic matching task, about as basic as they go. Another variation using the flashcards, I would do without using the board. Or maybe I'll use the board just to illustrate the point. And this is useful if you've got especially even numbers of students in the class, and you've got large-ish classes. 4 or 6 is perfect. In that one, all you need to do is get them to stand up, but you don't get them to line up. You get them to move back behind them. So they put their chairs in, and then they move back to the wall or the space behind where they're sitting. On one side of the room, you would give, let's say we've got 6 in our class. Student, I'll use the board again just to illustrate the point, but again, this would be done physically. You give the students a card each on one side of the table, and tell them they can't show anyone. You then give a letter card to people on the other side of the table, and then all you do is you ask them to find their partner. So again, there's huge amounts of variation you can do in this. You can make it a race, who can find their fastest and quickest, and they just end up shouting at each other and waving their cards at each other. And in the end, normally after a few seconds, they should find out who their partner is. If you've got a nice big classroom with a space where they can actually physically move around, then great. You know, let them mingle and find their partners in a communal space. Variations on that again could be, you could maybe have one group lining up against a wall, and then the people on the other side take it in turns to move around to the other side of the room to find their partner. And then once they're found, they move to a different place. But again, it's still that basic action of matching together two different ideas. We can also do more traditional card game kind of activities. So snap is a good one. This is best to be done down on the table. You can either do it when they're sitting down. I still think it's often good to get them to stand up, just because then it feels like a different kind of interaction. And then maybe in the center of the table or at the head of the table, the teacher can, again, the challenge of picking up these cards off the board, choose one idea, and then on the table, turn over the cards until they match, and then the students have to shout snap. Obviously, snap, much easier if you're doing it on a table and not on a whiteboard. But you get the idea. So snap is a very, very quick, very effective game. You can even do it just to break up another interaction while they're sitting down doing their work. You can even use it as an early finisher task. If you've got a student who's finished all of their work, the others are still doing it, and you want to keep them occupied, snap is a good one to do. Another one, which is based on a card game, would be you put the cards down flat, and then students take it in turns to turn over 2 cards. You know the kind of game. So, okay, they don't match, so I put them back. Well, I know that this one is P, so they match, and then we take those out of the game. Or we leave them on like that. Again, variations you can do. You know the kind of game. The students will also know this kind of game. They will have played this kind of thing with their parents, so if the language barrier is an issue for you, games like this can be a really useful way if you're worried about instructions not working. So as you see, there are hundreds more matching games that you could do, but what we've covered in this video is just a few of the basics. Their aim is to build associations between 2 concepts, and you can use them very effectively from very early on in a phonics course. So yeah, hopefully you found it useful, and we'll talk about some of the other games and activities you can do in other videos.